Hey everyone, it's Aaron. So I'm going to go into more depth on the conjunction trick. This was one of my most requested topics. Conjunction trick is a type of fragment run-on question that also requires you to do some reading comprehension. Let's start by briefly reviewing what a conjunction is. A conjunction is a word that helps connect two separate ideas. For the purpose of the example, I'll be using the word however. The conjunction trick usually uses what are called adverbial conjunctions, which are common essay words. Therefore, however, furthermore, moreover, and so on. Let's look at the examples in my graphic. The first two do what I call applying backward. I ate lunch an hour ago. I'm still hungry, however. In this first sentence, the however is establishing that the contrast should apply to I am still hungry. The same thing happens in the second example. I ate lunch an hour ago. I am still hungry, however. I should have a snack before dinner. Either way, the however applies backward to the previous clause. Another way of saying this is that the however applies to the clause it is part of. The semicolon works like a dividing line. It ends the first clause. So when I say, in the second example, I am still hungry, however, semicolon, I should have a snack before dinner, the semicolon is dividing the sentence. The however is part of the first clause, I am still hungry. It is not part of the second clause, I should have a snack before dinner. Let's look at the next two examples, where the conjunction applies forward. I ate lunch an hour ago. However, I'm still hungry. In this case, the semicolon comes before the however, which means that the however is part of the clause that comes after, not part of the clause that comes before. The contrast is still applying to I am still hungry. One important thing to note in this case is that the conjunction, however, will skip dependent clauses. Let's look at the last example in my graphic. I ate lunch an hour ago. However, even though it was tasty, I'm still hungry. The however skips even though it was tasty and goes straight to I am still hungry. The dSAT does have questions that require you to know this. Let's scroll down to my table where I have all of this information. I put the template form of the sentence. I, in this case, stands for independent clause. AC stands for adverbial conjunction, which is the however. In these cases, the adverbial conjunction, however, would apply backward. In this case, independent clause semicolon, adverbial conjunction, comma, independent clause. The adverbial conjunction, however, would apply forward. One other possibility we did not discuss is that the adverbial conjunction can come between the subject and verb. Bob ate lunch an hour ago. I, however, am still hungry. It doesn't matter where the adverbial conjunction goes. It will always apply to the clause that it is inside of. In these example sentences, I underlined the clause that the however is applying to. With that expanded tutorial out of the way, let's look at some example questions that I made specifically to target conjunction trick fragment run-on questions. I'll provide a link to this spreadsheet in the description in case you want to practice. Let's start with number 1. If I look at the answer choices, I can see that they have all the same words, but they have different distributions of punctuation. The fact that there's a semicolon before however in A and a semicolon after however in B makes me think this is very likely a conjunction trick question. I mean, it's obviously a conjunction trick question because I made it, but I'm pretending that I'm a student taking the test. Let's start with the sentence that contains the underline. Modern scholars consider Keats to be one of the greatest English language poets. Some kind of conjunction. His works exploring themes of inspiration, beauty, depression, and death are a timeless addition to the literary canon. Let's think about this. Do these two parts contrast? Modern scholars considering Keats to be one of the greatest poets is probably a positive thing. And his works being a timeless addition is also a positive thing. So we're stuck. The conjunction wouldn't really work if it applies forward. This means we probably need to go back and read the entire passage. The Romantic era, the artistic movement from approximately 1800 through 1850, was originally controversial, as its anti-Enlightenment stance led critics at the time to label its most prominent artists as unsophisticated, immature, naive, and excessively sentimental. Modern scholars consider Keats to be one of the greatest English language poets. Now you can see where the contrast is. It's between these two elements. We have modern scholars who think that Keats is good, and then we have critics at the time who think that Keats, among the other Romantic era poets, was bad, essentially, or immature. sure. This means that we want the contrast to apply to this part, not to the part after, which means that we need to put the semicolon after the however, so that it applies to the clause that it's in, which would be this first clause. That means the answer has to be B. Let me actually type this here so you can see what it looks like. However, semicolon. And we need a comma after language. Remember, a semicolon is a dividing line. The conjunction cannot apply to anything after this. That means that the contrast is in this idea, which makes sense because critics at the time thought Keats was bad. However, modern scholars think Keats is good. Let's move on to question number 2. Again, I can see with the answer choices that this will probably be a conjunction trick question because of the fact that there's semicolons before however and semicolons after however. Let's start by just reading the sentence that has the underline. The traditional searing method, searing first and finishing in a high temperature oven, leads to uneven cooking, especially for larger cuts, and an inconsistent sear due to surface moisture. J. Kenji Lopez Alt's reverse sear, which involves cooking steak in the oven at a lower temperature and then searing, solves both problems by evaporating surface moisture prior to searing and ensuring more even cooking. In this case, it is reasonable to say that the contrast is within this sentence. You have two elements. You have a traditional sear, which creates two problems, uneven cooking and an inconsistent sear. Then you have the reverse sear method, which solves both of these problems. This means that the contrast should apply forward, or the contrast should apply to the second element. That means I want the contrast to apply to this highlighted part, which means I want to put the semicolon before the however to make sure that it applies to the clause that it's inside of, which would be the second clause. Let me type this here so you can see. However, I'll put the semicolon after surface because the semicolon would be the dividing line. The however cannot apply to this now. It can only apply forward, which means the contrast is in this idea. The traditional sear is bad, the reverse sear is good. I'm going to skip to number 4 because I want to leave some of these for you to solve for practice. Again, I see that there's some kind of connector, and there's different options for where the semicolon goes. This is a conjunction trick question. Let's read the sentence with the underline. A regular past tense verb will have a noun before a regular past participle, which, confusingly, will be spelled the same way as a regular past tense verb, will have a finite verb before. This sentence is dealing with two separate ideas. The second idea starts here. A regular past participle will have a finite verb before. You can see that the sentence ends with the word before period. Let's look at the parallel case with a regular past tense verb instead of a regular past participle. A regular past tense verb will have a noun before. We want them to be parallel. We want them to end the same way, which means that the correct answer here is actually B. If I do for semicolon, this first idea ends the same way that the second idea does. This whole part here is only here to distract you and trick you. Let's remove it. A regular past tense verb will have a noun before. A regular past participle will have a finite verb before. These are parallel. The reason why this is a conjunction trick is because they want you to misread the sentence in this way. A regular past tense verb will have a noun before a regular past participle. This is not the case. The before is not connecting the past tense verb with the past participle. I based this question off of dSAT 6 Mod 2 question 22. Let's look at this one to see how they're parallel. Clear glass, which is classified as transparent, allows all, or almost all, light to pass through. Wax paper, which is classified as translucent, allows only some light to pass through. The trick here is they want you to think that it says clear glass allows all light to pass through wax paper, but that's not the case. The first idea ends with the word through, just like the second idea ends with the word through. Therefore, the correct answer for 22 is C. One final thing I'd like to point out is that we actually pronounce the word however differently depending on if it applies forward or backward. This is because a rising pitch indicates that new important information is coming, whereas a falling pitch helps indicate that we're at the end of an idea. Let's compare version 1 applies backward with version 3 applies forward. And listen to how I pronounce the word however. I ate lunch an hour ago. I'm still hungry, however. You can hear that the however went down. I'm still hungry, however. Now compare this with option 3 where the however applies forward. I ate lunch an hour ago. However, I'm still hungry. However, however, that's how you pronounce the however in the third example. However, versus option 1. I ate lunch an hour ago. I'm still hungry. However. I'll just do the two howevers so you can compare them. Number 1, however. Number 3, however. This is a very different inflection for these two words. If you're not sure which one to use for the dSAT, try reading it in your head and see which inflection you use naturally. This should be a backup. Solving it logically and using the semicolon as a divider for the sentence is always a smarter option. That's it for today. Thanks everyone, and good luck on the dSAT.